In Thomas Pynchon's short story collection, Slow Learner, he has an essay at the beginning where he talks about with Crying of Lot 49, he's failed at every lesson that he learned previously. And to him, one of the biggest lessons and the reasons that he's failed is to start with the human element first, to start with that human emotion, and don't start with a theoretical notion first. And when I first heard this, it was something I wanted to fight against. I wanted, like, no, let's do all these crazy theoretical concepts in literature. But the more I read and the older I got, I realized these theoretical concepts that we learn about, the whole mode of existence is to understand the human process. And if we divorce these theoretical concepts from that, we make the same mistake that Pynchon talks about in Gravity's Rainbow, where we're creating systems for the sake of systems. And that can be dangerous. And it can also be very boring. And unfortunately, we experienced that today with the book I'm talking about, Wits by Joshua Cohen. Now, Wits is Joshua Cohen's magnum opus, and it is like an 800-page stonker of a book. And I gotta be honest, guys, I was reading this throughout the year. I was reading this when I was doing Women and Men earlier. I got to page 400. I had to take a huge break, came back to it, and the reason I kept stopping for this book wasn't because how difficult it was, and it is difficult. The reason I kept stopping for this book because how much I didn't want to read it. Before I get into that, let's lay some groundwork. So this book is about the Jewish experience in a lot of ways. It takes place in an alternate world that's similar to our own. It's about the birth of a Messiah. A man named Ben, the main character, he is born a full-grown man to a Jewish family. And shortly after that, his family dies because everybody who's Jewish starts to die off in this world. They're called the affiliated. And then he goes on a Gravity-esque rainbow adventure where he goes to all these different locations and is trying to escape an organization that wants to hold him down and keep him captured. I don't often do this with books, but I can relate this to two main books. Gravity's Rainbow, like I said previously, just the man trying to escape this organization and for reasons he doesn't exactly know what they'll do with him, and just all the crazy escapades he goes on throughout his adventure. And you can see a lot of influence from Gravity's Rainbow in this book. There's even a part in the book where they talk about like an anoid and stuff like that. And the other book, which I related to even more so, is Gal's Goat Boy. They're using a lot of alternate names for Jewish people or World War II, just a lot of alternate proper nouns for stuff. And also, both book addresses the idea of the monomyth. While Gal's Goat Boy kind of going over the hero's journey, Wits does that intentionally or not with the journey of the Messiah and this messianic figure and what he has to go through. And the main character, Ben, does mirror a lot of the elements of Jesus Christ. Then that, like, he goes to the desert for 40 days. So there's a whole huge desert scene in Las Vegas, Nevada. The crucifixion, the coming back to life. All those elements are just kind of there. Sometimes they're not one-to-one. They're a bit more jumbled and stuff like that. But you see a lot of that in the book as well. And so let's go over the positives of this book first. The language in this book is absolutely gorgeous. I love the language in this book. I was just drooling over the language. So what he does is that obviously he has the big postmodern stuff that you typically see with these long, elaborate sentences that go on and on, that list so many things, almost like a book of lists, and it just keeps going. But he also has a lot of references to the Bible in this book. And the character's plot follows the Bible a lot. He makes a lot of allusions to the Bible, and he plays on it. One of the first things, he goes like, this guy begot this guy, begot this guy, begot this guy, which is just like the Bible. He just changes the nouns to fit more contemporary setting. And you'll have discursions into Bible text as well. On top of that, though, you also have that postmodernist sense of humor, that very infinite jest sense of humor, where it's trying to put all these wacky scenarios and put it more to like a more mundane kind of business setting and stuff like that, almost to take this speciality out of it. But then you just have like wacky stuff like his foreskin constantly growing, like aliens, him turning into a woman. There's all this crazy stuff throughout the novel. So you have that layer as well. And also you just have the layer of like, kind of like a typical Jewish novel, if that makes any sense, where it's like he's just kind of bringing his experience of Jewish life outside of the biblical and more like the contemporary stuff you'll see in Philip Roth, and just like interjecting that within the novel as well, and into the literature and the prose. So the prose is gorgeous, and I love that. But also the prose was one of the things that really hampered this book as well, because so this book is so bogged down by the language. I didn't think I was ever going to say that. Being this far into my reading and my studies, having read all of McElroy, having read all of Pynchon and all these great authors, loving Ulysses, I didn't think prose was going to be a hindrance to me in terms of plot. I feel like that's a criticism that people first going into the maximalist style really might have with it. It's like, oh, the language is beautiful, but nothing happens in this book. Nothing happened in this damn book. Oh my god, guys. Like, so much of this book, you can probably cut out 400 pages of this book, because so much of it is just setting. Now, setting can be a very important thing in a book. Not just establishing where the characters are, but on a level of, like in Virginia Woolf, establishing what the characters feel, what they're going through, giving you an atmosphere of what's going on in the novel. It can do, setting in itself and describing it, can really get into a lot of characterizations and really be the bulk of how you learn about these characters. The setting in this book and all the digressions in it don't really matter, in my opinion. It's just beautiful language for the sake of beautiful language, or being quirky for the sake of being quirky. You don't have those moments like in Wolf where when you're reading the setting and you realize, like, oh, I know how the character views the world, or the emotions and the atmosphere and the aesthetics of the setting is actually the same aesthetics for the character. Or learning about Dublin, Ireland, and how it influences the characters in the book, and you can see how they're intertwined. You don't get that here. It's just beautiful set dressing the whole way through. So many pages. Like an example is like he sees a UFO. It's a great, that part is really cool. It's one of my favorite parts in the book. He takes 2 to 3 pages just to describe the UFO landing. And mind you guys, this book's as big as my head. Look at the page count in here. So 1 page is almost like more like 2 pages for like a typical novel. And it's like, guys, I don't need 2, 3 huge pages just to describe the UFO landing. Let it land. Let's get to the bulk of it. And the problem that he does, that I've had some problems with another maximalist fiction, but I've noticed it here, is that my eyes would just glaze over because he describes so much setting, and then it's almost like, well, this is just information. It's not really relevant to anything. I'm not learning anything. And then after that, he'll do a major plot point and it'll just go by so quickly. Why don't you spend more time on the major plot points? Other novels, I can forgive that a lot more, but we spend so much time on setting. Like, he goes to like a Jewish heaven near the end of the book called Witzland, and like it's like implied after the character got crucified, or there's a crucifixion scene, so it's like Jesus' time in heaven. This should be a cool part, because all the affiliated are dead in the novel by this point, so you should be learning a lot of stuff. Witzland is like, he just takes a tour through it. So one, he's already on a tour, so he's disconnected from everything that's happening, and it's just setting. I really don't know what the point of that was. Now, I'll be honest, there's a lot of stuff I missed in the book. It's one of those books that you just can't get everything on first read through. But I guess this is something I'm still coming to terms with. I'm trusting myself as a reader a lot more, that I can handle these difficult works and get a lot of it. I got a lot out of Lookout Cartridge, even though I didn't understand everything in Lookout Cartridge. And I just don't see the point of like scenes like Witzland. I think it was just because, like, oh yeah, Jesus died, let me write a segment about that. Why did you have to follow it so hard if he had nothing really to say about it? So it's a character on a tour, just going through this landscape and this city that frankly is not that interesting. There's a lot of booths that sell shit. Cool, bro, I guess. And it just got to a point where like it was just getting so old. And it was just such a center point of the novel. And because of all that setting, not much happens in this novel. It's really, if you go on the Wikipedia, there's only like 4 paragraphs, small paragraphs of what the plot is. It's pretty much what you can break the plot down to, because there's other scenes where like, it doesn't matter. Like there's a scene on the golf course, cool. There's a scene like with a pyramid, which is kind of interesting, but it just didn't where he was going to get married, but then he didn't get married because he escaped the pyramid. And it's like, oh, okay. And that really gets to the core problem with this novel for me, that there's no human elements. So here's what I mean. Benjamin Disraeli gets born as a full adult man, and his family dies immediately. And this is what I compare it to Giles Goatboy. So Benjamin Disraeli doesn't have any characterization. He's a man who grew up without having to be a child. So we don't learn of any of his troubles or experiences of him trying to learn and understand the world. Throughout the whole novel, it's like Tyrone Slothrop, where he's just taking from one place to the next scene, to the next scene, to the next scene. And he doesn't really grow as a character whatsoever. Now, why this was more acceptable with Tyrone Slothrop is because we take a lot of breaks from Slothrop. We go see what a lot of other characters are doing. Characters have a lot more characterization than Slothrop and has a lot more trouble. Since Slothrop is just more meant to be like that RBG nameless character that can insert for ourselves to some degree. And it kind of goes into the plot where he loses himself and he's always like putting on a different costume. So Slothrop doesn't really know himself. For majority of Gravity's Rainbow, we're spinning the book with other characters. And Slothrop is more of a vehicle and more of a centerfold to pin down this chaotic, crazy universe. We don't get any respite from Ben in this novel. He only like a few segments of chapters. It's always, always, always about him. And it's just so annoying because he doesn't grow. We don't even hear his thought process. We don't even, aside from him running away, he really has no interaction with what's happening around him. He's just going from scene to scene. A great example is that he has like these fake sisters in the novel that are meant to replicate his actual sisters, and a fake mother, so they're actresses playing the roles of his family. They come in and out, and at one point he's performing cunnilingus on the mom, and the tongue comes out. And it's kind of like, cool? I don't know what the point of that was, because we have no relationship with him and his sisters. They're just none, because like they die shortly after his birth. So it's like, okay, well, these people are just strangers to him. And so why would replicating them be so important? Especially for so much of the novel, he's not even interacting with these fake sisters. They only come up like at 2 points of the novel. And I think he only meets them like once or twice. So that whole scene with his performing cunnilingus on his fake mother, it's just wacky to be wacky because there's nothing to tether these two people together. It could have been any other person. Like, just the fact that you put the mother thing is supposed to elicit emotion in us, but in the story, it just really doesn't matter. And that's where the Giles Goatboy comparison comes from, because at least with Giles, he was born a goat, so he doesn't really have a backstory either. But you see him become arrogant. You see him learn from his ways. You see the arc of him. Who is like he finds out he's like he might be the I think the Giles, I forget the name. You know, it's like, okay, he's becoming arrogant, but then he just kind of ebbs and flows, and he has changes through the novels, and you can see how these struggles shape him, even though in reality both these characters are starting from ground zero when you first meet them. An argument you can make against me too is that, well, hey Ben, a lot of the stuff in the Bible really isn't fleshed out. Like, the characterizations aren't really there. They're just a lot of stereotypes in there and archetypes. And yeah, that could work. However, at the same time, again, mind you, I'm not super versed in the Bible. I read a little bit of it last year, but from what I've seen, stories switch super quickly, super fast. Like, the New Testament isn't just the story of Moses. It goes through a lot of things, and a lot of the Bible and a lot of what I've seen from like ancient literature from myths and stuff like that, it's meant to be more like a very quick, condensed story. Now, I'm sure there's examples out there that go against that for me completely, and you can get me wrong and everything of that. But I would also probably say that it jumps around from generations or to different characters very quickly as well. So when you have an 800-page novel, just add some damn characterization over here, or let it go be like the Bible and let it be an allegory. Let each thing be an allegory for a different lesson. There's no lessons in these scenes. He saw an alien that likes to collect the last thing of every item in the universe. What is the lesson there for us humans? It's just a quirky scene. So imagine if you're reading the Bible, or ancient myths that took out the lesson out of each thing. You just have stuff, to be honest. So I can, part of me felt like maybe he's trying to go for that, but I still don't think it's a good method to go by. And so, okay, so Ben, he's not really much of a character. Is the story going to be about the Israelis, about his family? No. The first 200 pages where I read them and you were reading about the Passover, which is really beautiful and well done. I love that part. Again, but Passover sometimes takes long in real life, but it takes so long within the story in those first few pages, like, oh my God, get to it. Where we focus on the dinner itself, it'd be much better time connecting Ben with his family, even though he was born after Passover. And so we're not learning about his family. It's not like a Philip Roth book where, even though Roth is the main character, you're learning, it's not so much about the boy's troubles. It is in a lot of sense, but you're learning so much about the father, so much about the uncle, so much about his cousin or his brother or his mother that, yeah, even if the character might be a little undeveloped, which is not in the Roth, in the Plot Against America, the main character is very developed, but you can use him as a placeholder to learn about these other factors, and you don't get that either. The first time we actually really learned something about the Israeli family outside the first 200 pages, well, not even first 200, maybe the first 100 pages, which you don't learn anything about, to be honest, except for the father, is page 500. It's like, by that point, like, I don't care, man. It's too late. And he spends so much time, again, focusing on the home of the Israelis, but that doesn't tell us anything about the actual characters, especially when the family's so large. Besides, like, the mother and the father, he has 12 other sisters. A lot of them don't mean anything. We find out more about the father's and mother's relationship later on, but that's more through how they came to be through their grandparents and a little bit of how they met. We still don't really get a good sense of them, but god damn do you know everything about the friggin' house that we explore multiple times. It's just aggravating because it's like, dude, I don't want to hear about the house. Like, cool, you describe this house in detail and beauty. But in a lot of ways, it's like, if I showed you the neighborhood I grew up in and I just showed you houses and stuff like that, you might get a small sense of me, but if you didn't know anything about me, you wouldn't really learn anything about the houses that I'm showing you. The houses don't really imply much about me as an individual or wouldn't differentiate me from anybody else in my neighborhood. And that's just a really frustrating part. So, and I think the Israelis, and especially the father, have an interesting backstory to them. Right? Maybe I just implied one on them, but they die so quickly and you don't learn about them, so it's not about him discovering his family. Is it about the Jewish identity? Not really. I have Jewish identity myself. I'm not, I always say I'm Jewish, I'm not a Jew. I only celebrate Passover. I was raised Catholic and all that. But, like, there's a little bit there and whatnot. This novel covers that, but it's really surface level. Unless you know nothing about the Jewish experience, it just covers Auschwitz. It just covers, like, a little bit of contemporary Judaism. It covers stuff in the Bible. It's Old Testament. It's nothing very too pertinent. And even the contemporary Jewish experiences, I don't think is too much there, to be honest. It's all just like, yeah, World War II happened, buddy. Cool. It's like, yeah, fake Messiah, because he's not the Messiah at the end of the book. People don't accept him as that. Okay, Jesus is not the Messiah to the Jews. Cool. So you're not getting anything too substantiate. And also the problem is, it's in an alternate wacky world where there's aliens, the Jewish people are just dying out of nowhere. So the world is already pretty disconnected from our own, and that doesn't help it. So we're not getting the Jewish experience. So what are we getting? Funny jokes that are not funny. And what I mean by that, Matt on the Spinecrackers podcast, I was talking to him about this, and he had a great way to put it because he read a lot more Joshua Cohen than I have. He said, like, yeah, you can tell Cohen just really wants to be funny and write these funny novels, and he thinks he is, but it comes off as so academic. And I think that's a great way to put it. A lot of the humor in here just misses. A lot of it just kind of like, oh, here's the Messiah. Oh, let's put him through this bureaucratic thing. Oh, look at him. Let's put a bunch of dick jokes with his foreskin constantly coming off. And it just feels like, yeah, when your teacher tells you a joke, and not like one of your good teachers also. And it's like, yeah, I guess that's technically a joke, but ain't nobody laughing. Like, it's just... like it just comes off as so cold, and it's just like, oh, okay, well, if I want to make a joke, I'll put him in a wacky environment that's also somewhat mundane. It'd be like, oh, what if he saw Jesus at the DMV? Like, yeah, I guess that's funny for like 2 seconds. Oh, okay, well, let me put a bunch of dick jokes in there too. It's like, cool. It's like, is there anything you're trying to get at in the just dick jokes? No. It's like, okay, well, why are you talking about all this transgressive sexuality if you don't really have anything larger to say about it either? And so, by scene level on this novel, it was just so boring. On a humanistic level, it just really wasn't there. On a level of Jewish heritage, it just wasn't really there either. So on a transgressive level, it just wasn't there too. So all you really have in this book is setting. And you know what? If this book was like 200 to 400 pages, I would definitely recommend it. The language is really beautiful and it's consistent through the whole novel, and for that, I really appreciate him for doing that. However, it's just waste your time. It's just a big time waste. Here's an example. So this book is nothing but ridiculous, surrealist stuff that doesn't connect. Death to the Pigs by Benjamin Pedette. I probably said that wrong. I mentioned it several times on this channel, and you get weird stuff like everything was said except the words that rip the veils, held by teardrops, and that clear the expanses with the 1,000 migraines that every step renders more palpable. So it's just crazy sentences that don't really mean anything like that, and only for like about 200 pages or so. And I love this. I love that somebody did that. I love that somebody took language to this point. But if somebody did this for 800 pages, fuck you. Like, it's like, what do you have to say about stuff? Like, Ulysses has very complicated, dense language, but once you get past the language element, if you just took that out, there's something really there he's trying to say with that book. If you took out the language from this book, one, it'd be like 400 pages. Two, it wouldn't even be an average book. I think it'd be subpar in a lot of ways. So I have to say I'm very disappointed by Vitz. It wasted so much reading time this year for me as well. And once you get to that point where you're really getting the language and it's not that difficult anymore, you really see what a shallow experience this book is. And for somebody who loves maximalist literature, for somebody who has a Jewish identity, and who loves transgressive stuff and loves wacky stuff as well, this book should have really been for me. But I kind of hate it. Hate's a strong word. I just really don't like it to a phenomenal degree. I'm going to recommend it to him. But yeah, with that, if I don't like it, if it didn't catch me, who is this book for? I could only really say people who are huge Joshua Cohen fans, writers who want to see what it looks like when you spend too much time on language for a whole book. If you want to get a sense of the literature and the language in this book, just read like the first 200 pages, honestly, because the language is very consistent throughout. The language being this well crafted throughout the book, through 800 pages and how big those pages are, that is a huge achievement in itself, and I have to give that absolute credit. The language, the prose in this book is incredible. There's just nothing else to this book, and so I can only really say, yeah, read this book for the most hardcore maximalist readers out there who want to complete every big maximalist book, or huge Joshua Cohen stance. But for everybody else, don't waste your time. And it's really disappointing to say that, because this book was calling out to me earlier this year, and I really wanted to enjoy this book. But I do not recommend this book whatsoever. But let me know if you read this book. I know this book is very controversial. I know people have like the back and forth opinions that I have on it, and I'm a bit more negative than other people. But if you read this book, let me know in the comments. I'd really like to hear your opinion on it. Or if you read any other Joshua Cohen books. I've heard from other people that his books just aren't quite up to the par as the old school maximalist, unfortunately. But if you want me to read another one, I'm going to take a huge break. I might read Numbers. But if that book doesn't go well, I'm probably done with Cohen. But yeah, leave a comment below, and I hope you like the video.